Welcome to the Tailrace podcast, where we're all about figuring it out together. We believe that when people discover truth and love, they face life in a different way. With me today I have Sarah.
Hey.
And I'm Holly, and we're going to listen to Rod Jessen on the podcast.
Rod is a pretty cool guy. He is my dad, and he talks about how we can ask God for what we need in life's tough moments. So I'm really excited for today. He's a bit of a funny man sometimes, so listen to the podcast and see what you think.
Rod, thank you for joining us here.
You're welcome, Jono. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's always nice to see your smiling face.
Can only but try.
I know why he's smiling though.
Why is he smiling?
The Premier League started again.
Yeah, that was
New
good the other
season?
night. Yeah, my team's on top, I think, although I didn't check who won last night.
I reckon you guys would still be on top.
Good goal difference.
Yeah, by the time this comes out, you guys will probably be facing relegation. Arsenal fan, for anybody wondering at home.
I can't believe you even thought of that. Today.
How are they going to go?
I'd be happy with the top 5 finish.
Sorry, this is actually just turned into a sports podcast. We've just got to talk about football for the next
Fine, go
3
for
hours.
it.
No. Top 5?
Top 5.
Top 5, not top 4.
It'd be nice, but there's a lot of good teams there.
A lot of good teams. There you go. What do you think about
What
that,
do you think,
Shaz?
Shaz? Where are they going to finish?
I have
Arsenal?
no idea where they're going to finish, but you'll be really proud of me. I've watched some soccer documentaries, and I started watching the one on the about the Australian cricket team.
Did you?
Yeah.
You loved the basketball one, The Last Dance.
I did love the
Bit of Michael
basketball
Jordan?
one, bit of Michael
I haven't seen that
Jordan.
one yet.
It's very good.
Yeah.
And I watched that one about that soccer player in England who was amazing. Well, I think he played for Liverpool.
he
Robbie
Australian?
Fowler or something.
Hey,
Robbie
no,
Fowler? No?
Stevie Gerrard.
Yeah, that's him.
Stevie Gerrard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Sleepy G.
Yeah.
Good
so,
player.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome guy.
So you surprised?
Yeah, actually. Yeah. Yeah. What did you like about the Michael Jordan one before we get started?
Oh, I just love that gift, that some people have, their drive and their energy. And whilst some of their character might be a bit off, you can't help but admire that talent and that commitment to that talent and just that sheer determination that we're going to
Yeah.
win. I love that winning attitude. I'll do anything to win, and you're all coming with me.
Yeah.
And we're going to build this winning team. And
Yeah.
he just didn't let anybody off from winning. I love that.
He was relentless, wasn't he?
Oh, he was relentless. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of, no, this is relentless, but anyway. So we might as well make a start here. So we're unpacking what it means to pray and how to pray. And we're focusing in on verse 11 today. Give us today our daily bread. But I might just read it just for a little bit of context and then open floor. What do you think Jesus is talking about here when he says, give us today our daily bread? So, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we have also forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. So when you hear that verse 11, what do you think Jesus is trying to pull out and say? Either of you.
Give us today our daily bread.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I suppose it's about trusting God in the everyday for everything that we need. So it's kind of like when you're praying that, it changes you, doesn't it? Because you kind of stop relying a little bit on yourself and you kind of go, if I'm going to have my needs met, then I've got to bring it to God. Because God's the one that can only ultimately meet all my needs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you let go of control, which is pretty hard for a control freak.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
I think it is hard to let go of control.
Yeah.
But, it's... I think the journey of understanding this verse is kind of like you'll go through different phases along the way and learning how God works in different ways for you and as you call upon him. And but I think what I can say about what happened with me was that there was sort of this time where you had to... He just wanted to move me into a space where you'd ultimately just trust and rely upon him. And it didn't sort of start out, well, I don't think it started out until I sort of got into more of a crunch time. I saw when we went overseas a few times, like if you had a little bit of money, you could almost buy your way out of trouble.
Yeah.
And you can say, oh, yeah, that was God's provision, but then you get into other places where you can get, like, especially with money, you get to a kind of a rock bottom, or not much in the cupboard or not much in the bank account. And that was kind of where you get to a point and you're going, well, if God doesn't come through here, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Having said that, in our society, we're probably, it's not as bad as what it could be in other places. And when you travel around the world and you see different things and different people and the way that they live, in some ways we are very fortunate. But yeah, I just feel God wanted to move me into a place where it was rely upon Him, was what He was asking me to do.
Was that hard as a bloke? Because often, and I don't want to be stereotypical here, especially given the fact that it's the year 2020. It's only 20, isn't it? But, was that hard? Because often, in talking with a lot of men, they still have that thing about being able to provide for their family and being able to look after their family.
Yeah.
Was that hard, letting go? Because you're kind of letting go of that too, that identity part, in a sense, aren't you?
Yeah, and like, to be honest with you, I'm 51 now, and it probably didn't happen until I was about 38. So that's not that long ago.
Yeah.
So in the point up to that time, it's like, as I said, you feel like you can often buy your way out of problems or troubles, or there's an ability to go and earn, and that's sort of the role that you feel that you take on as a father and a husband and all those sorts of things. But yeah, for me and our family, it did get to a point where we just had to hold on to God.
That's scary, isn't it? At that point, like, it requires a lot of faith.
Yeah, but I think it's probably a point that God needs to bring us to. So
how did that change you? Did it change you, or was it kind of like an experience, and now, thank goodness, I'm not there anymore and I'm living in a different phase of life? Or did it actually change you?
Well, I think what it does is it takes you from, like, what does the verse mean? Give us today our daily bread. So ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, God is the provider for everybody and everything. But then you break that down, you go, well, how does it happen?
Yeah.
What's the practicality of that? So my original practicality was that someone from the church, actually, when I had a great need, came and gave me money.
But they didn't necessarily know that you needed it.
No. So I've never been someone who kind of shares that kind of information. It's just, God, this is where we're at.
This is what I need.
So for someone from the church to come and do that says to me that God's got things in hand. He's got control. He's looking after us. But it gives that person or other people in the church or whatever it is the opportunity to move in that space of being the one who actually provides the daily bread, so to speak. So from where, I suppose that takes me from a position of need into when I've got more than I need, how can I sow that, and how can I bless others, and how can I make sure that I do my bit to help God do His bit, I suppose. Does that sound right?
It does.
So it increased your sense of generosity. It increased your ability to keep your ears open to how God might want to utilise you in money. So to have a free hand, not a fisted, because sometimes when you go through those experiences, you can become very tight-fisted, can't you? You can kind of lock down into fear and kind of go, well, I'm never going to be in that position again, so I'm always going to make sure I've got everything in the bank account, all the ducks lined up, and you live this kind of closed, tight-fisted life, as opposed to, okay, well, God provided there, so I can be generous in my giving because He was faithful, so I know at the end of the day He's got me.
Yeah, I think that's the case, and I think I was probably raised to be generous, and Mum and Dad certainly modelled that to us in different ways. So that underlying generosity thing, I think, sort of something that our family has always had. But I think you're right. You've got that. I'm in this moment. I'm in what I feel like is a crisis. What am I going to do? I don't think I came out the other side of that tight-fisted. So that's
So it
pretty
reminds
cool.
me a lot of our conversation with Davo earlier on in this series, where he spoke a lot about how when his prayer life is good, he's a lot more sensitive to what God might be saying to him about, and he had this amazing story of this bloody man at a phone booth. But it reminds me of that because when we start to incorporate like our possessions and our wealth in our prayer life, like all of a sudden we are more sensitive to God saying, go slip a little $20 to, do you know what I mean?
Yep.
But if we're not including that possession, that material wealth or our needs in our prayer life, obviously sometimes we can just miss it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a situation like when COVID came up. This is before the government invented JobKeeper. And, we could see what was going to happen at the Tailrace Centre. And I just really clearly felt God say, well, there's a certain person that I want you to make sure that you can support them through this period of time. So I actually went to Tim and said, I think I really feel this person needs to keep their job. And we put some funds in for that. So
And as a result, the beautiful thing about that is that person will say that COVID was the making of them. And they will say that this season has been the best season. They've got ahead financially. They've, their confidence, their skills, everything. That this has been their season to actually rise up.
Yeah,
So it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I look at that person like they were on a great journey already, but they're just full of life now. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
When I read this verse, I wonder, is it just material needs that we're talking about that will give us today our daily bread? Is there also like those other kinds of needs that God's promising to deliver us? What do you guys think?
Well, I think his life story, the way he lived and interacted with the people when he was walking the planet would suggest that it was all sorts of needs. So, he meets the woman who's had 5 failed relationships. She's at the well, she isn't treated well by other women because, they're fearful, is she going to come and take my bloke now? I reckon there were all sorts of negative and derogatory remarks made about her interaction and behaviour towards men. He just meets her at the well there and he said, I can give you what you're longing for, which in her case was relationship and intimacy and to be known and to be valued and to be loved. And to be protected and cared for, and he said, I can give that to you. And so in that instance, she actually wasn't looking for a financial handout. She was looking for something far deeper, and he kind of said, I'll give it to you. I can do it. If you turn to me, I can give it to you. Yeah.
That's good. Does that resonate with you, Rod? Do you agree?
Yeah. I think like we are carriers of hope and goodness and love and kindness and all those gifts that God gives us. So, that's ultimately our opportunity day. I can't see a day goes by where you don't have an opportunity to shine a bit of that somewhere in the people that you interact with or the people that you... And often there is that more intentional or, God's saying go and do that or talk to that person or all those sorts of things. So give us this day our daily bread is it's just that embodiment of being an ambassador and being walking around trying to be the best form of Christ.
Well, bread's the symbol of life, isn't it? Like in every culture, bread's the symbol, it's the food of life. You know, at the end of the day, if you give people bread, they'll survive. So for me, it's just symbolic of everything that gives us life.
That's a beautiful picture.
Yeah.
Bread being life. Give us today our daily bread. Give me today what I need to survive, to be able to have life, to be able to flourish.
Yeah. And I think it's a great prayer to teach your children that part because, give us today our daily bread. So you teach your children, give me today what I need to cope with today. So if a kid's being bullied in the class, in the school ground, it could be the bread that I need for that day is resilience and courage to withstand what I'm going through, to not let it affect my identity. Or it might be that I need a new friend, or give me the bread might be the courage to actually go and talk to a teacher about a need that I have, or, you know. So I think it's a great prayer to actually translate and teach your children how to pray. But you've had some experience with this as well, haven't you? Tell us about your journey, because you moved to Adelaide and all of a sudden you had to pray, give us today our daily bread. So tell us about that, because I think it's important.
Sure. So we moved to Adelaide, my wife and I, so she could do some study. And we didn't have a lot of money when we moved, and I found it harder to get a job initially than what I thought I would. And we didn't have much money. And it was really stretching, and for some reason, Centrelink just wouldn't come to the party.
And your brother wouldn't either.
No, the brother was pretty good. Can't complain about the brother this time. He's behind the camera, so he might just turn me off. And I found it really, really tricky, because it wasn't just the financial need or the actual physical bread that wasn't on the table, but like I didn't have any of those sources that would sustain me when I was back here. So when I was back here, I had the soccer club, I had the church, I had my friends, I had my family, had all these things which, you know, made up who I am, which made up Jono. But I suppose when I moved over there, I didn't have any of that, and I went through a little bit of a period where I really struggled with that. Yeah. And so what I did discover, though, is that as I invited God into that space, as I sort of prayed that prayer desperately, saying, "Oh God, I really feel like something more than just oats to eat this week. I really feel like having like something actually decent."
I recommend Wheat Bix.
Wheat Bix, you reckon?
Upgrade from oats.
You guys had pancakes.
We had pancakes.
Pancakes.
They're the best pancake makers.
I have heard that the Jessens are the pancake lords.
Yeah.
That's it.
Currency of pancakes and maple syrup. But yeah, I suppose it was just coming to learn that. Like I still remember the only job that I could get for the first little while that I was over there was delivering catalogues. And it's such like physical work, like it just sucks.
It's with a uni degree, eh?
Yeah, yeah, and it's just like my fingers are far too big and fat to be able to quickly just like compile all the catalogues and then drop them off. And I remember being out just doing the loop and then being like 3/4 of the way done. And then I just get the phone call saying that I'd got this job. And I just remember just celebrating in the street.
Just chucking pamphlets on.
I remember just dropping my bag of pamphlets, just going, "Don't need to live like this no more." I was just like, thank you, God. And I didn't look back. I was very, very grateful.
Thanks for joining us so far in this conversation. We'll be back to it in just a moment. We want to take a moment to share with you one of our favourite prayer guides. It shows 3 really simple ways that you can pray. You can download this great resource from our website at www.tailracecommunitychurch.com.au/services. Now back to the conversation.
But I think those times they do teach you things. They do teach you that God is provider, that God does fill the need, whatever that need might be. Sometimes it just takes a little faith for that in between. Like the hardest time's the in between time, isn't it? The waiting time of like, God, where are you? With that timing.
Because it's so easy in our culture to go for help elsewhere, isn't it? You know, like we've always got Centrelink as a backup.
Yeah.
For a lot of us, we have family, we have friends as a backup. But what happens when you don't go down, or when you choose not to go down that route because you want to learn something different? You want to test God and kind of see, well, are you really truthful in what you say or not? Because it's one thing to say that He'll provide, it's another thing to live it.
Yeah, 100%. And there's so much richness and like reward, I suppose, that comes through from your faith when you do experience that and you do build that resiliency muscle, that courage muscle, that strength muscle, whatever that might be. Like there's a lot more depth to your relationship with God. No longer is He just like some fairy in the sky or some God of tradition and religion
or parents.
But He's real. Like He is there with you. He is provider. Like there's something really freeing and secure in that, I think, that you carry with you for the rest of your life.
It's pretty cool that you got to experience that at a fairly young age.
I know both of your stories. I think we've all experienced those tricky times. Yeah. Do you guys feel sad for people who don't experience?
Oh, sometimes I'll be really honest. Sometimes I'm really envious when people go through their entire life and they've never had to do that kind of, and they've just always had everything provided for them.
Yeah.
And I guess we could have lived that way, but we chose not to. We actually chose to give away what we had because we felt that what we had isn't ours. We don't own anything. It's there to be shared. And so you hold things lightly and you give things away. I often say Tim would be a rich man if he'd married another woman. So some of it's our own doing. And so sometimes, I'll be honest, there's a part of me that is envious of people who just seem to seemingly sail through life. But then when you sit down and you have the conversation, you realise they've never had those unexpected moments where God provides something and it's just totally out of the blue. They don't have those rich stories. They don't have those stories that they can pass on to, children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren. They just don't have that richness.
Like when we were in the midst of that, sort of I felt was the crisis time, like someone gave us a brand new car.
Wow.
So,
that's amazing.
I mean, it was a family member, but nonetheless, they
it still counts though.
Oh mate, it was unbelievable. So to experience that, and they're Christians. They've obviously heard God say, new cars required here. Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
Holly was right in her episode on this series. God is a car salesman. A car mechanic.
What was that one?
She was talking about God being a father. You never go to your mother about cars. You always go to your father about cars. And she was just sharing how God's shown up every time she's needed
every
a car.
Every car that she's ever had has always been the result of this need of saying, God, give me today my daily bread.
Wow. It's pretty cool.
It's very cool, isn't it? Yeah. What else? Is there anything else in that verse or on this theme of generosity or stewardship or faith that you guys feel?
I just think it's a really important now prayer, and for some people, because we are going to enter a recession, there's just no way around it, and so economically things aren't going to be easy for quite some time, and that's nobody's fault. It's not the government's fault, it's not your employer's fault, it's nobody's fault. It is a reality that we all have to come to terms with. And so some of that will mean living more simply, but and having different expectations. But some of it is also an opportunity to live differently, to not live, because our world is so tight-fisted, we're so economically driven, we're so materially oriented. We've got to have the best house, we've got to have the best furniture, we've got to have the best car, we've got to have this, that, but it's also an opportunity for us to live and bless the world, because even though we're going into an economic recession, Australia is still a wealthy country. We are still an incredibly wealthy country. And so even when we cut back, our houses or our mansions are mansions compared to what the rest of the world's going through. So I also think it's an opportunity for us to live generously, outrageously, with our hands open in generosity and kind of going, okay, well, how can I help the poor? How can I help the lost? How can I help the lonely? How can I, what difference can I make? What can I give away? And what can I trust that God will look after back here so that I can be generous-hearted?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a wonderful opportunity we're in.
Yeah, going towards the edge, aren't we? We're just going to see how close we can get and how God's going to hold us there, and we're just going to look over this edge, which is going to be an amazing view. So it's sort of, it's an exciting opportunity. I don't know if I've explained that properly, but we're sort of going to be there. And who knows what that looks like exactly, but I think it's a lot of the things that you've said there, Shaz. We just be generous, be kind, look out for others, look for those opportunities to give, to bless those people around us.
And see how much we've already got that we can just share, because we have so much.
Yeah, I've got a tent. I've got a few actually, so maybe might have to use it.
That's good. Just a little curly question just occurred to me. We don't have to answer if we don't want to. But how do you guys navigate the tension of understanding that God is provider and that he wants us to live open-handed, not closed-fisted, so that things that we receive, we hand out only to hopefully be filled back up again. How do you guys balance that with the prosperity gospel? Do you know what I mean? That line of thinking of there's a formula to getting material wealth out of God.
Yeah. Well, for me, that hasn't worked.
That's what I was going to say.
There's a lot of work involved in that, in believing that.
I'm pretty good with formulas, being an engineer and mathematician. I still haven't worked that one out. So.
God doesn't actually promise prosperity anywhere that I can see. He promises to meet our needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've found with that prosperity doctrine that you paddle very hard, trying to manipulate, coerce God, twist his arm to get what you need. There's a lot of work involved in that, whereas I think, I don't know, the way Tim and I, our conclusion is that you work out what you need to live on, to live simply. You work out what that is, and then the rest you kind of let go and you give it away as best you can. Yeah.
It's a very simple way of looking at it.
Yeah, and if you have a lot of income in a year, then you have a lot to give away because, you know, your living standard, I mean, our living standard's been the same for a long time. You know, you don't just necessarily go out and increase the standard of your living just because your income goes up. So I think you just work out how to live simply. And
that's not to say you still can't enjoy nice things.
No.
Go on nice holidays or anything like that.
Yeah. But you live simply and then you just give the rest away. And sometimes you might give away 10%, sometimes it might be 30%, sometimes it might be 70% of your income. It just depends on... But you just work it out.
Yeah.
And it's just a simple way to live. Yeah.
That's cool. That makes sense. What would you guys say to anybody that's watching from home that's on the edge, they're flirting with the idea of trusting God with this one? How would you guys extend the invitation to, or what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think I'll just encourage them to go on that journey. It may not necessarily be easy, and there'll be moments that there may be moments of despair, but as you get into that space, just cry out to God, trusting Him, rely upon Him. I can testify that He's faithful. I think we all can.
Yeah.
That's great.
I would say get a budget together. I would say I'd make sure that you're being as wise as you can, and that doesn't mean that you're then trying to take any of the faith stuff out. I just think that there's a diligence there. So if it's to do with money, I would do my budget, and then if there's a shortfall, then that's where you need to start praying, God, I need a job, or I need, help to rein in some expenses, or I need wisdom, or I actually need some help here. And God's good at giving all those things. Sometimes it's wisdom, sometimes it's knowledge.
Yeah.
It can be all sorts.
Yeah. That's good.
And I think the other thing on that one is that sometimes what I've found is He's brought along, for us, it's not even so much about whether He's given the financial. Often it's the richness of other people, isn't it? It's that sometimes He's just brought along the right person who's either given you the wisdom you haven't had to look at a problem, or they've been there to strengthen or encourage you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Very good.
Yeah,
Is there anything
He's a good God.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about?
I don't think so.
That's pretty good.
Cool.
Thanks, John.
Well, thank you, Rod, for joining us.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. We really enjoyed the conversation. If you enjoyed it too, why not share it with a friend? You might be able to help them discover a little bit more in their journey with God as well. You can also go to our website where we've got the resource, How to Pray, and if you want to connect with us, you can find out how there. Thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you next.